Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome from a wet and windy Galway. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Just to let you know that the webinar is being recorded. I'm Evelyn Fanning. I'm a Senior Health Promotion and Improvement Officer with the HSE. I'm also Chair of the Galway City Alcohol Forum, and we're delighted to be hosting today's webinar on alcohol and cancer, reduce the risk. The forum itself operates as a subgroup of the Western Regional Drug and Alcohol Task Force, and it's comprised of a range of partners across different sectors, if you like, health, justice, education, the community and voluntary kind of sector, children and young people services, and the local authority. So all those agencies have come together in Galway City to work on preventing and reducing alcohol-related harm. In terms of the format for this afternoon, in a moment, I'll be introducing our guest speaker. I'll then come back in just to talk a little bit about some of the resources available. And we hope to have a little bit of time at the end for some questions. So the question and answer, if you like, function is just at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to pop in a question at any point during this afternoon. So just to give you a little bit of context in terms of, I suppose, why are we doing this webinar this afternoon in the first place? So in terms of the Galway City Alcohol Forum has come together, as I said, in terms of trying to, as part of a wider plan of trying to create a healthier Galway. So we have a plan in relation to from 2024 to 2029 in relation to preventing and reducing alcohol-related harm. And that plan is built around three core goals. The first of those is around communication and awareness of the whole issue of alcohol-related harm. The second one is trying to, I suppose, strengthen how we collect data and how we use data on the whole issue of alcohol-related harm. And then the third one is trying to develop the capacity, if you like, of services and organisations in the city in relation to that whole topic. And today's webinar, I suppose, really addresses goal one in terms of trying to enhance that awareness across the community on the link between alcohol and cancer. And it also supports goal three in terms of trying to develop the knowledge and confidence among professionals and the wider community. So I guess it's not just a one-off event. What we're trying to do, I suppose, is work in a coordinated way. And that's, I suppose, we appreciate you joining us today on that journey. It's now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. So I'll just stop sharing. So I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Breeda Neville, who's a public health consultant, in public health medicine with the HSE National Cancer Control Programme. And Breeda is going to lead us through the main presentation. So we're delighted to welcome you, Breeda, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Evelyn. So I'll just share my presentation. So as Evelyn said, I'm a consultant in public health medicine and I work in the HSE's National Cancer Control Programme, where I work on cancer prevention and early diagnosis of cancer. And today I'm going to speak to you about alcohol and cancer. So we have known for a long time that alcohol causes cancer. Alcohol was first classified as a Group 1 carcinogen by IARC, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, in 1988, so almost 40 years ago now. And this means that there is sufficient evidence that it causes cancer in humans. So to put that into context, other Group 1 carcinogens include tobacco, asbestos, and ionizing radiation. Alcohol causes at least 7 types of cancer: mouth, pharynx, larynx, esophagus, female breast, liver, and colorectal cancers. And there is accumulating evidence that it may be associated with an increased risk of developing prostate cancer, pancreatic cancer, and melanoma. In 2023, the World Health Organization declared that there is no safe level of alcohol consumption and that cancer risk increases even with low levels. Any amount or type of alcohol increases cancer risk. Cancer risk begins at low levels and increases substantially the more alcohol is consumed, but even light to moderate drinking causes a considerable cancer burden. So in the European Union in 2017, 23,000, or almost 1 in 7 of all alcohol attributable cancers, were caused by light and moderate drinking. So almost half of these, or approximately 11,000 cases, were female breast cancers. Light to moderate drinking was defined as consumption of less than 20 grams of pure alcohol per day. So this is the equivalent of 2 standard drinks in most European countries, including Ireland. So a standard drink is equivalent to a small can or bottle of beer, a small glass of wine, so a 100 ml glass of wine, or 1 shot of spirits. And more than a third of the cancer cases resulting from light to moderate drinking were actually associated with a drinking level of less than one standard drink per day. So there was 37% overall, 40% in women, and 32% in men. In Europe, 7.1% of all cancers, or 244,000 cancers per year, are attributable to or caused by alcohol. So this includes 34% of breast cancers, 28% of bowel cancers, and 21% of mouth cancers. Alcohol is one of the leading risk factors for cancer in Ireland. It is estimated that over 1,000 cancers were caused by alcohol in Ireland in 2020. This included over 260 breast cancers, over 320 bowel cancers, 1/3 of cancers of the mouth and pharynx, a quarter of laryngeal cancers, and 1/5 of esophageal cancers. So to understand how alcohol causes cancer, it's useful to first think in a simplified way about what cancer is. The cells in our bodies are constantly growing, dividing, dying, and being replaced in a controlled way. Sometimes things that we are exposed to can cause damage to the genetic material or DNA in our cells, and often, sorry about that. Often our bodies can repair this damage, but sometimes they can't, and cancer develops when these abnormal cells grow and divide in an uncontrolled way. And alcohol contributes to this process in a number of ways. So when we drink alcohol, our bodies metabolize or break it down into a chemical called acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde causes damages to our cells by damaging proteins and DNA and impairs cells' ability to repair DNA damage. The process of breaking down or metabolizing the alcohol generates reactive oxygen species. So these are highly reactive molecules that can damage DNA, proteins, and cell membranes. And this oxidative stress increases the risk of mutations that can lead to cancer. Alcohol also impairs the body's ability to absorb important nutrients, which may protect you from cancer. So, for example, alcohol affects folate absorption and use, raising cancer risk because folate plays a key role in DNA synthesis and repair. Alcohol can increase the levels of some hormones in our body, for example, estrogen, which increases breast cancer risk. And in addition to all of this, it also facilitates other carcinogens in entering our cells. So it does this in two ways. First, it increases the permeability of cells or the leakiness of cells, particularly of the mouth, throat, esophagus, allowing other carcinogens to enter more easily. Secondly, it's an excellent solvent. So it helps harmful chemicals in tobacco smoke to enter the mouth, throat, and esophageal cells by acting as a solvent, dissolving these chemicals and making them easier to absorb. As a result, combined exposure to alcohol and tobacco has a multiplicative effect on the risk of developing cancers of the upper aerodigestive tract, so cancers of the mouth, throat, and esophagus. Those who use both have a 5-fold increased risk of developing these cancers compared to those who use either alone, and those who drink heavily have up to 30 times the risk. We know that awareness of the link between alcohol and cancer in Ireland is very low. In the 2022 National Cancer Awareness Survey, less than half, or 42% of people surveyed, spontaneously identified alcohol as a risk factor for cancer. Amongst those who were aware of the alcohol-cancer link, almost half, or 46%, incorrectly believed that alcohol only causes cancer if you drink a lot over a long period of time. So in contrast, 81% identified tobacco as a risk factor. And this is in spite of the fact that both tobacco and alcohol are classified by IARC as Group 1 carcinogens, meaning that there is conclusive evidence that they cause cancer in humans. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Public Health Alcohol Act and alcohol legislation in Ireland. So the Public Health Alcohol Act 2018 was signed into law on the 17th of October 2018. The primary policy objectives of the Public Health Alcohol Act are to reduce alcohol consumption to 9.1 litres of pure alcohol per person per annum by 2020. So while per capita consumption of alcohol has fallen to 9.9 litres, the target of 9.1 by 2020 was missed. And just to put it into context, the current European average is 9.2 litres per capita. We know from the Healthy Ireland survey that 73% of people aged 15 and over in Ireland drink alcohol, 38% of them drink at least once a week, and 21% binge drink on a typical drinking occasion. So that's over a quarter of people binge drinking regularly. So the other objectives of the Act are to delay the initiation of alcohol consumption by children and young people, reduce the harms caused by the misuse of alcohol, and ensure that the supply and price of alcohol is regulated and controlled in order to minimise the possibility and incidence of alcohol-related harm. The Act includes provisions for minimum unit pricing, structural separation, health labelling on products that contain alcohol, restrictions on the advertising and marketing of alcohol. So there's a prohibition in place on advertising in certain areas, so such as on the field of play of sport and other areas, like for example within 200 metres of schools and other child-friendly public spaces and on public transport. And alcohol advertising at an event which is aimed primarily at children or at which the majority of participants or competitors are children is also prohibited. A broadcast watershed for alcohol ads came into effect on the 10th of January 2025. So now there can be no advertisements for alcohol products on television from 3 a.m. to 9 p.m. and on radio on a weekday from 3 p.m. to 10 a.m. the following morning. The regulation of alcohol sponsorship. So sponsorship of events aimed at children, events at which the majority of participants or competitors are children, and events that involve driving or racing motor vehicles is prohibited. And restrictions on certain promotional activities. So these include promotions that allow for alcoholic drinks to be sold at a reduced price or given away for free when bought alongside other products, or short-term price promotions where the price of an alcoholic drink is reduced for a period of less than 3 days. So Section 12 of the Act provides for health labelling on alcohol products. And it was commenced in May 2023 and it was due to come into effect on the 22nd of May 2026. But there has been huge resistance from the alcohol industry and extensive lobbying on their part, and unfortunately it has now been delayed until 2028. So they've particularly focused on trying to cast doubt on the message about alcohol and cancer and to downplay that risk. So you can see here on the right there's an image of the label. So the label will include information on the risks of drinking in pregnancy, the risk of liver disease and the risk of cancer. And it will also include information on the alcohol content in grams and the energy content in kilojoules and kilocalories. The aim is to increase awareness of the link between alcohol and health and to empower people with knowledge to make an informed choice. Labelling is really crucial for people to make informed decisions about their health, so it's incredibly disappointing really that it has been delayed. So just a word on the energy content of alcohol. The calorie content is actually a key element of the labelling. So at present, alcohol is probably unique in that I certainly can't think of any other food or beverage products that don't have a calorie content on the label. And alcohol is actually really high in calories. So a gram of alcohol contains 7 calories and only fat has a higher calorie content at 9 calories per gram. And in addition, alcohol provides empty calories. So you're getting the energy in the calories, but you're not getting any nutrition with that. And alcoholic drinks also contain other things such as sugar, wheat and barley that also contribute to the calorie count. So it's likely that at the moment, many people are inadvertently consuming a lot of calories through alcoholic drinks. So I'm just going to talk about our current low risk, in inverted commas, alcohol guidelines. So the current guidelines define low risk drinking as less than 11 standard drinks per week for women or less than 17 standard drinks per week for men. They recommend that drinks should be spread out over the week. You should have 2 to 3 alcohol-free days per week, and you should drink no more than 6 standard drinks on any one occasion. So these guidelines are at odds with the message that there is no safe level of alcohol consumption. So there are a number of issues with them, including they may imply that there's a safe level of drinking. Low risk may be interpreted as no risk. The cutoffs may be seen as a target, and people may save up their units in order to drink them all in a single sitting. So the guidelines are currently under review. So it's likely that the new guidelines will look more like Canada's low risk guidelines. So you can see them here on the right. So the Canadian guidelines describe a continuum of risk rather than low risk cutoffs. So there's some key points from the guidance here which I'll take you through. So they start off with the 0 drinks per week. Not drinking has benefits such as better health and better sleep. 2 standard drinks or less per week. You are likely to avoid alcohol related consequences for yourself or others at this level. 3 to 6 standard drinks per week. Your risk of developing several types of cancer, including breast and colon cancer, increases at this level. 7 standard drinks or more per week. Your risk of heart disease or stroke increases significantly at this level. And you'll also notice that in addition to not having this kind of a safe upper limit, the limits that they're actually referring to, they're not limits, but the numbers are significantly less as well than our 11 and 17 standard or units a week. Each additional standard drink radically increases the risk of alcohol-related consequences. Consuming more than 2 standard drinks per occasion is associated with an increased risk of harm to self and others, including injuries and violence. When pregnant or trying to get pregnant, there is no known safe amount of alcohol use. And when breastfeeding, not drinking alcohol is safest. And crucially, they emphasize that no matter where you are in the continuum, for your health, less alcohol is better. So everyone, or most people anyway, will be familiar with this assertion that a glass of wine is good for you. But is that true? So on the left here, you'll see the now debunked J-shaped curve. So what is a J-shaped curve? So if you look at the curve here on the right, graph B, you'll see that it shows the relationship between physical activity and all-cause mortality. So the x-axis down at the bottom shows minutes of physical activity per day, increasing from left to right. And the y-axis on the left shows mortality increasing from bottom to top. And you'll see that as minutes of physical activity per day go up, mortality goes down. So when you plot minutes of physical activity against mortality, you get more or less a straight line. So then the graph on the left shows the relationship between drinking alcohol and mortality. So researchers plotted the data from lots of studies on this graph, and they got what's described as this J-shaped curve that you see here. So you can see that on the x-axis again down at the bottom, you have drinks per day increasing from left to right, and then the y-axis shows the hazard ratio for mortality. So a hazard ratio of 1 means that there's no difference in mortality. So that this line here at 1, that's the baseline. So anything below that line represents lower mortality, and anything above it represents higher mortality. So what this curve showed at the time was that for moderate levels of drinking, so you can see up to here, so up to a cutoff of around 2 to 3 drinks per day, mortality rates for moderate drinkers actually appeared to be lower than in non-drinkers. And then once you get to this point of that kind of 2 to 3 drinks per day cutoff, beyond that, as you drink more, the mortality goes up. So you get more of a sort of a straight line curve above the line. The more you drink, the higher the risk compared to non-drinkers. So this curve, these data, this is where this idea that a glass of wine is good for you came from. But recent higher quality research has shown that these apparent benefits are likely to be due to confounding factors and biases. So there was evidence of abstainer bias. So many studies included former drinkers who may have given up drinking due to illness in the abstainer group. So that made abstainers look less healthy. The healthy user effect. So moderate drinkers often have higher socioeconomic status, healthier lifestyles, and better access to healthcare. So they may be healthier for those reasons rather than being healthier due to their moderate drinking habits. Then reverse causation. So what that means is that people in poor health may be more likely to abstain from alcohol. So they're not drinking because they're in poor health, as opposed to being in poor health due to not drinking. And crucially, when studies using lifetime abstainers, so people that had never drank in their lives, as the reference group, and controlling for the confounders, the protective effect of moderate drinking disappears. So what you get then, when you've taken all of that into account, is you get a straight line curve like the one on the right, that shows you that as alcohol consumption goes up, mortality goes up. So is it true that a glass of wine is good for your heart? Unfortunately, no, it's not. And in addition to all of this, in 2023, the World Health Organization stated that there are no studies that would demonstrate that the potential beneficial effects of light and moderate drinking on cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes outweigh the cancer risk associated with these same levels of alcohol consumption for individual consumers. So basically, what they're saying is even if there were to be some benefit from moderate drinking, that benefit is significantly outweighed by the risk of developing cancer. So I think that we need to have a cultural shift in terms of how we think about alcohol and cancer. So if you think about smoking, so as a society, we've gone from this, so more doctors smoke camels than any other cigarette, to this. So there's nothing sexy about smoking. So we're a long way from here, really, when it comes to alcohol. And sticking to that analogy of smoking, so tobacco is a group 1 carcinogen, just like alcohol. Everyone accepts that tobacco causes cancer. Um, and it is true that while smoking definitely does cause cancer, it is also true that somebody who smokes 40 cigarettes per day is at higher risk than somebody who smokes 5 cigarettes per day. But we would never advise somebody that, yes, smoking causes cancer, but don't worry, you're at low risk because you only smoke 5 a day. Or we would never say that smoking is fine in moderation. But in fact, we're quite wedded to that idea when it comes to alcohol. So we really need to reframe our thinking when it comes to alcohol and cancer risk. So many people say that they find the topic of cutting down on alcohol or eliminating alcohol difficult to raise with people or to discuss. And it can be useful when you're having those kinds of discussions with people to obviously, advise them of the fact that alcohol is a risk factor for cancer and for other chronic diseases, but also to focus on the more immediate benefits of cutting down or giving up alcohol. So we all think that cancer won't happen to us, but people will experience these benefits very quickly if they cut down or give up alcohol, and that can be very motivating. So they include better sleep, more energy, weight loss, low blood pressure, healthier skin, fewer alcohol-related symptoms like headaches, heartburn, indigestion, and stomach upsets, better mental health, so people will experience reduced symptoms of depression and anxiety, and more money. And I think if there was a pill that could do all of these things, people would be queuing up for it. So in the National Cancer Control Programme, we're working hard to raise awareness of the link between alcohol and cancer among healthcare professionals and the public. So we have a module on reducing your cancer risk on HSE land, and that includes a unit on alcohol. We have information and resources available on our website and on healthpromotion.ie. And we run webinars and other educational events for healthcare professionals and members of the public. Our senior health promotion and improvement officers in cancer prevention are working to raise awareness within their own regions. And Caroline Murray, who is on the call and who many of you may know, is the Cancer Prevention Officer for your region of HSE West and Northwest. We work with the HSE Alcohol Programme and Alcohol Action Ireland, and we've done a lot of advocacy around the labelling through our membership of the Irish Cancer Prevention Network. So the Irish Cancer Prevention Network is a collaboration between ourselves, the National Screening Service, the Irish Cancer Society, Breakthrough Cancer Research, and the Mary Keating Foundation. But I think everyone who works with patients and the public has a really valuable role to play in spreading this message, and a coordinated, concerted effort is required in order to turn the tide on this. So what are the key take-home messages? So there are no health benefits associated with drinking alcohol. Any amount of alcohol increases your risk of developing cancer. The risk begins at low levels and increases with amount and duration of consumption. But even low and moderate drinking levels are responsible for a considerable cancer burden. The more you drink, the greater your risk. And reducing your consumption or avoiding alcohol completely will reduce your risk of cancer. So thank you for your attention, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
So thank you so much, Dr. Neville, for such a clear and comprehensive overview there on the topic of alcohol and cancer and reducing the risk. What we're going to just so encourage you to, as I said, to use the Q&A function. And just before we go to that part of the session, I'm just going to spend just a few minutes going through some of the resources that are available. So there's a range, I mean, and some of these, Breeda touched on some of these just in our presentation there. So I suppose just on the left-hand side, there's a poster, if you like, a very clear kind of poster outlining some of the risks, I suppose, in specific cancers, which is available like to download from healthpromotion.ie. It's a nice kind of, it's an A4 kind of size, and it's a useful thing that can be shared, I suppose, in waiting rooms or in certain, community facilities as well. It puts across, I think, the message very easily. On the right hand side, then I suppose through the HSE specifics has a number of web pages, if you like, on the whole topic. So one is just focusing on the whole issue of evidence-based information on the whole topic of alcohol and cancer. And in addition to that, in light of the conversation we were just having, there's also some self-help advice and guidance in relation to people who are interested in maybe cutting down or stop drinking. Our a recent enough podcast on the whole topic of the truth about alcohol and cancer featured indeed Dr. Breeda Neville, who's on the call with us this morning, and Dr. Sheila Kilheeney from Alcohol Action Ireland. So that's available. That's around 30-minute long. So it's a very useful podcast for people to, I suppose, to pick up at any time. In relation to some of we touched on some of the information leaflets as well. Healthpromotion.ie is a resource, I suppose, that's available to anyone to use in terms of downloading information, or also, for ordering kind of some leaflets. So there's a range of topics available on different aspects, going from different, I suppose, population groups to different life stages, ranging from pregnancy and alcohol to the whole issue of hidden harm in terms of for families that are affected by somebody else's drinking. And then there's a lot of focus on parents and young people, and I suppose trying to protect children and young people from alcohol-related harm. And then there's ones in terms of looking at the guidelines, which is kind of what Breeda touched on there in relation to a quick question, and then specifically focus on different population groups, specifically for women, men, and older adults. So there's just if you search on healthpromotion.ie under the topic of alcohol, you'll get access to those. As I said, some of them are available to download, some of them are to order. So it just depends on, at any given point in time, what the status of some of those, if you like, is. In terms of, I suppose, some other HSE resources, askaboutalcohol.ie is really, I suppose, the web-based kind of resource that has comprehensive advice in relation to alcohol, all things alcohol and health. In addition to that, so the HSE also has drugs.ie, which also, while having information on alcohol, also has information on drugs, and has some information on some supports and services that are available on that particular website. It also, there's a helpline then, a national confidential alcohol and drugs helpline, and that operates Monday to Friday kind of office hours, sort of 9:30 to 5:30, and there's a free phone number which is there on your screen, 1800 459 459, and in addition there's an email address there that anyone, whether it's a family member or somebody you're concerned about, or somebody that you want to find out information, or indeed for yourself, anyone can access that in terms of trying to find out some information and support. In terms of toolkits, the HSE Health and Wellbeing, I suppose, have developed a couple of toolkits. One's focusing specifically on the whole issue of, I suppose, fetal alcohol spectrum disorders and trying to support alcohol-free pregnancies. And in addition to that, there's also one specifically focused on supporting parents and the important role that they play in trying to protect children and young people for alcohol-related harm. And we touched on one of the podcasts, you know, about the truth about alcohol and cancer as one of the ones that is featured from the HSE Talk and Health and Wellbeing podcast series. And in addition to that, there's 5 more podcasts that have actually featured on various aspects of topics related to alcohol. So a couple of those related to, if you like, the whole bigger picture in terms of looking at the whole issue of alcohol and reducing harm. And then there's some specific population groups, you know, focusing on, some of them are focused specifically on parents and alcohol, or young people and alcohol. So they're useful, I think, resources just for people to be aware of in terms of enhancing your own professional learning, but also to share with service users or organizations that you're in contact with. Those are available on, you know, wherever you get your podcasts really, but they're also available on the HSE Health and Wellbeing YouTube channel. And then I've introduced Orla Walsh from the Western Region Drug and Alcohol Task Force. And Orla, you can just talk us through maybe some of the resources that are available from yourselves.
Thanks, Evelyn. Just to highlight some of the resources that we at the Western Region Drug and Alcohol Task Force have available, and I suppose to guide people towards our website, so you'll see it down there, wrdatf.ie, and our social media platforms. And I suppose some of the resources we have would be resource leaflets and information pieces for parents who want to talk to their children or their teenagers with regard to alcohol. We also, earlier this year, launched a Parent Hub, which is an online platform with all the information about supports and guidance around dealing with young people and substance use. And then I suppose as well, we have the Family Support Handbook, and as part of our family support service for supporting family members who are impacted by a loved one's alcohol or drug use. And as part of that, this leaflet here on the right has been developed around for if someone in your family drinks a lot, and it's a leaflet around maybe identifying what might be an alcohol related brain injury. We also do some training around that at the moment. So we'd also have a range of training options, including SARE, the screening and brief intervention for problems with alcohol and substance use. So just to encourage you to check out the website, and hopefully there'll be resources there that meet your needs. So thanks, Evelyn.
And in addition to that, I suppose in terms of HSE has its own, you know, Making Every Contact Count program, which is around, I suppose, encouraging health professionals to, you know, to have brief conversations with their service users in relation to lifestyle behavior topics. And, you know, alcohol is one of the topics of the modules as part of that training as well. So as I said, one of my colleagues, Angela Killian, works in relation to that. So if people are interested in that, we'd be delighted to support them in terms of that particular program as well. So this kind of brings us into the Q&A, if you like, part, I mean, of the kind of the webinar. So we have, I've asked Roisin, my colleague Roisin, to introduce Roisin Ahern in Health Promotion and Improvement Officer. Roisin, we've given you the task of having to look through the questions there. So if I introduce you, Roisin, please, in relation to that part.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Dr. Neville. So a few questions have come in, so we'll try to get to most of them. But the first one, Dr. Neville, is what is your view on non-alcoholic drinks?
Yeah, okay, so I suppose it's a little bit complicated. So first of all, you know, is it better for your health to drink some of the non-alcoholic versions of, you know, of the traditional alcoholic drinks, you know, than an alcoholic drink? Of course it is, you know, and I suppose one thing to remember as well is that actually some of them do have alcohol at very low levels in them. They aren't all 100% alcohol free, which is worth bearing in mind. But I suppose my reservation about them in terms of if you are, you know, if you're speaking in like a public forum like this, or if you're counseling someone on an individual level about sort of reducing their alcohol intake, is that those drinks have been used in a very cynical way by the alcohol industry. And so, for example, now that they're not allowed to advertise, you know, alcoholic drinks in many scenarios, they just advertise the non-alcoholic version instead. And it's been there, you know, there's evidence to show that advertising non-alcoholic versions of some, I'm not going to listen to any of the names now, but, you know, some of the, you know, the big drinks, it also drives the sales of alcoholic drinks. And I suppose it still feeds into that culture of that, we can't function as a society. If you can't have the alcoholic drink, you absolutely must have at least some version of it. So look, there's a place for them, definitely. But I have reservations about them in terms of the sort of health promotion message, I suppose.
Okay, brilliant. Another question that came in is, if your weekly exercise outweighs your weekly alcohol consumption, is that a healthy way to combat the effects?
So the short answer to that is no. So I suppose is having high levels of physical activity weekly beneficial in terms of reducing your overall cancer risk? Absolutely, it is. But it isn't something that you can mitigate one with the other because the mechanism is very different. So as I mentioned in the presentation, the key thing around alcohol, the carcinogen in alcohol is that chemical acetaldehyde. And no matter how much exercise you're doing, your cells are still coming into contact with acetaldehyde, which is what causes the cancer. And also you have that issue I mentioned if you're a smoker, where other carcinogens are facilitated. So none of that is mitigated by exercise. The only maybe slight benefit in terms of the alcohol exercise relationship is that I mentioned about the high calorie content of alcohol, and you might offset some of that. But in general, the answer to that question is no. They're two separate risk factors.
Okay, perfect. Another one came in is alcohol consumption culturally changing overall? And that I wonder, how long did the shift in tobacco consumption take to achieve? Is there a similar shift happening, do you think, now? Or did it take, a long time for alcohol to happen for now this to happen for tobacco?
Yeah, so I think with the tobacco, it did take decades for that to happen. So, do you know the images I showed earlier of that, uh, the time when literally doctors were advertising cigarettes to that, where we are now, where it's not seen as socially acceptable and we've all moved on, that took decades. And I think one of the key, like, it's multifaceted. There isn't one way to make that cultural shift. But I think one thing that was really key from the tobacco perspective was legislation. So the smoking ban actually had a huge impact in terms of turning the tide on that cultural attitude towards smoking. So similarly with alcohol, first of all, you asked, is it happening already? Like, there are some reports of maybe younger people drinking less, but beyond that, like, I think we're very, very far away at the moment from that cultural shift. Like, people are still very much, have this nearly emotional connection with kind of alcohol, and it's seen as part of our culture and all that kind of thing. And I do think, again, the legislation is really important. So I mentioned that, like, there are the Public Health Alcohol Act, there are an awful lot of the provisions in that are now in place. And I do think that they have made a difference and will continue to make a difference. But I think that the labelling piece is really key. And it's really disappointing that it hasn't been, that it has been delayed. But I think it's really important that people advocate for that, to make sure that it does come in 2028 wherever they can, because I think that will have a big role in terms of that cultural shift in relation to alcohol.
Great. Another one that came in is, how can we in our roles create a culture that supports healthier choices around alcohol?
But I suppose it's that piece around, I think it obviously depends on your workplace. Evelyn mentioned MEC earlier on, making every contact count. I suppose it's raising the bringing it up in the conversation. Like, I think, as I said, a lot of people are afraid to raise it, and in a way that, again, they might not be worried about raising smoking or tobacco, because again, we've all sort of accepted, even people who smoke, it's accepted that smoking is bad for you, something that we ideally would avoid, and people expect to be asked about it. But I think because, like, I mentioned data from the Healthy Ireland survey, where we know that 73% of people in Ireland, drink at some level. So I think a lot of healthcare professionals, and not just healthcare, people who are dealing with the public in this context, feel that they drink themselves. So they think, oh, sure, I can't be telling somebody else that they shouldn't be drinking. Sure, I was out of and I think you need to try and take that out of it. Your own behavior is a completely separate issue. Your conversation is for the benefit of the person that's in front of you, and don't be afraid to raise it. And again, I think that piece about the immediate benefits is really useful, because it is hard sometimes to motivate people when you're thinking about, down the line sort of outcomes like developing cancer or chronic disease. But if if you're going to tell someone that they're going to have more energy, they're going to have less anxiety, they're going to sleep better, and that's going to happen within a week if they stop, or cut down. I think that's really useful in terms of framing the conversation.
Just to say, if anyone then wants to contact our MEC coordinator here in the HSE in our region, for the Galway Main Roscommon region, Angela Killian is the person, and she can be emailed at angela.killian, KILLION, at hse.ie, or if anyone wants to email me after, we can send on the details, or by phone on 087 444 3401. So just to give that information, so that's around in relation to supporting people to have, as I said, follow those helpful conversations in relation to lifestyle behaviour. So whether it's alcohol, tobacco, physical activity, health eating, or whatever. So Angela's delighted to hear from you in relation to that. Sorry, Roisin.
No, that's nearly everything. One person just left a comment saying that they found the Canada model really interesting, and that, Breeda, you mentioned that this is an alternative to our low Irish guidelines. Is this something that we can see change in Ireland potentially from the HSE?
Yeah, so those low risk guidelines are currently under review. So ICOR are doing an evidence review at the moment, and the likely direction of travel is that we'll move to something more like the Canadian guidelines.
So just another one here. Can you reverse the damage of drinking at older age when talking to a client? So we talk to older clients, I guess. Can
Yeah.
you?
I suppose in terms of, I'm assuming they mean in terms of cancer risk.
Yeah, and
Yeah. So I mean, yes and no, in that, first of all, it's important to say that there's absolutely a benefit to reducing or cutting down alcohol at any age. And by doing that, you are reducing your risk of cancer. There's no doubt about that. I mean, in terms of cancer risk, it takes generally for most carcinogens, so any substance that causes cancer, you don't ingest it today and get cancer tomorrow. That would be very rare. It generally takes about up to 2 decades for cancer to develop. And I suppose particularly drinking at a young age then means that really increases your risk for cancer, because there's a lot of potential for damage a lot of people drink in their teenage years and their early 20s. So you can't go back in time and eliminate that entirely. So there will always be an element of risk there from your past drinking behavior. But giving up drinking or cutting down alcohol at any age absolutely reduces your overall ongoing risk for cancer.
Brilliant. Yeah, they're just saying never too late to cut down. So they're saying, is there an alcohol cessation officer similar to smoking or to GP services for patients who want to change habits? I don't know if Orla or Evan, that could be for you. Is there alcohol cessation officers?
I mean, the HSE, I suppose, there's some services in terms of trying to support people in terms of, so I know in recent times, I mean, in through 16th Merchants Road, they have a drop-in service there to try and support people. And there's also then some services in terms of smart recovery and I suppose some support through the task force. So Orla, do you want to come in there just in terms of maybe just highlighting some of those supports?
Yeah, there isn't an exact position in the same way as there might be around tobacco, but yeah, that you would have the drug service or the alcohol service, the Galway City Alcohol Services, based in Merchants Road, and you'd have a number of counsellors in the drop-in, and there'd be another number of allied services as well. But Evelyn, you've mentioned most. I suppose what we would say is if you look on our website, there the details of the HSE services are there, but to answer the question specifically, there isn't an exact similar post to the way there is around tobacco.
And I think part of the issue there, and it relates to, is around that, I suppose we're not, as a service, I think, capturing the data in a way to make the case. I think and that's getting back to one of the goals we had hoped in the alcohol strategy, is in relation to capturing information in relation to alcohol so that you can make a case for strengthening services. And without the absence of evidence or data, then it's very difficult to do that. So I think that's kind of part. So that's something I think that as a society, if you like, that all of the services, I think, could, look at maybe looking at what data are they doing that, or what can that be strengthened within their organizations? Because unless we have data and evidence in terms of building business cases, then we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. There's also a lot of people trained to do the screening as well. But again, as in not one particular role, but a lot of people within the region would be trained through SARE and MEC to screen and engage and have conversations with people in relation to their alcohol use.
So I'm just conscious of the time now and trying to get you, I suppose, keep within that. So just to say thank you for all your engagement into there in terms of the questions. So we really appreciate that. In terms of just before we wrap up, I'd like to say a sincere thank you to our guest speaker, Dr. Breeda Neville, for being with us this afternoon and the valuable insight and contribution that she's given to us today. To the members of the Galway City Alcohol Forum, for their ongoing commitment and support to this and the wider topic. To all the people behind the scenes in terms of my own colleagues in health promotion, Caroline Murray and Roisin Ahern, who helped in terms of giving us a dig out today, and to Orla Walsh in the Western Region Drug and Alcohol Task Force, as always, for your support. And of course, thank you all for joining us. So we hope you found, I suppose, the session useful. And I suppose, the key message really is simple. It's almost like reducing alcohol reduces cancer risk. So the less you drink, the lower the risk. And I suppose there are some supports available, or through the different things that we've highlighted today. So I guess going away from today, we'd invite you to consider maybe taking one simple action. So whether that's maybe listen to one of the podcasts, having a conversation with someone in relation to what you've heard here today, looking up some of the information. We all have a role to play. So I suppose we want to try and keep that momentum going. So thank you again for being with us, and take care.
Thank you.